So welcome everybody in EDU 540 to week 5. Oh my gosh, time is flying by and we have a lot to do. So buckle in. So what I want to do with this mini lesson is sort of set the stage for a couple of different things. For this week, we're going to be focused on persuasion. So essentially, we're going to be making arguments in favor of a particular topic to a particular audience and using a particular kind of genre. You're going to be doing this in your workshop groups. So give it some thought. Think about how you'd like to present your persuasion. Also, what kinds of questions you might have about that persuasion. You're going to be doing this in addition to your poetry lesson for this week. So as I said, there's a lot of work to do, but give it a try and see what you come up with and see how you can start to develop your persuasion as one of the artifacts that you may want to include in your writing portfolio that we'll take a look at during week 15. The other thing we're going to look at is the program analysis, which is essentially a memorandum. Now, this is not due until the very, very end of the course. It's due in week 15, I think May 18th. I'm providing it for you now because it fits well into the idea of persuasion. So I'm going to give you some ideas about how to shape that particular memorandum. Memoranda are very specific in terms of what kinds of formats they use, what they require. And so take a look at the folder that I've included also at the end of week 5 that has some memoranda resources in it that you may want to take a look at to help guide that process. One of the reasons why I'm giving it to you now is because we're talking about argument and we're talking about persuasion. And a memorandum is essentially a professional persuasion that you're going to need to create. And as a literacy specialist, you'll probably find yourself writing memoranda quite frequently to administrators, to teachers, and to various people. So it's a good thing to learn how to do. And the second reason why we're looking at memoranda is because you're going to have this particular assignment down the road. It's going to require you look at least 3 different kinds of writing programs that are available either in print or electronically that you'll want to convince your Board of Education to take a look at, and that you can start a book club or some other support group about with your teachers. That's basically the idea behind developing that memoranda. So you're going to be looking at developing those 3 texts. So kind of think about that as you go along in the course, and choose the one that's best for you, and the best out of those 3 that you would then recommend to your Board of Education. So this is located under the program analysis description in the syllabus if you want to go back and take another look at this. And again, memoranda are going to be very vital for you in your professional situation. So let's first get started by looking at argument. And this is something that we've looked at in the past, we've looked at before, and I've left for you the article from Sheridan Baker, Chapter 4. You're familiar with it if you've taken EDU 210. It is absolutely the best template and the best format for writing a persuasive essay and an argument that you can really use. And the reason for that is it stresses several things in arguments and several things in persuasions that you'll want to utilize as you provide your persuasion to your colleagues and start to think about persuasion potentially being part of one of your artifacts. And those are things like repeating what you're saying and repeating your argument several times. So in these supporting paragraphs that you may recall from this hourglass figure that's taken from the Baker text, those supporting paragraphs, you basically, in the thesis, you're saying what you're going to say, your concession and your supporting paragraphs are saying what you just said, and your conclusion is saying what you just said, or making the argument, and then at the end saying what you just said. So this idea of repetition is very important. There's obviously you want to create some sort of a hook for your readers and for your listeners. So as you look at commercials this week, you're going to see various hooks that are going to be provided that engage the listener, engage the viewer, engage the reader in different ways. So keeping your audiences in mind is also very, very important for any sort of a persuasion. So you want to look to that. So remember about those hooks. And also you want to develop some sort of a concession to make your argument that much stronger. Really, the thing that Sheridan Baker, that chestnut of a guy, developed for us was the idea that we want to get rid of the concession early. We don't want to do what Tompkins says in chapter 11 and talk about counter arguments late in the essay, because that's what's going to stick in the reader's mind. So that really doesn't work as well. You want to follow the idea of getting rid of your concession quickly, and then moving on with your argument and leaving that in the reader's mind at the very end. So for Baker's essay, the concession goes into paragraph 2. It's that part of the persuasive essay that follows the although, part of the thesis that follows the although. So take a look at Baker for this week and be thinking about how you want to model your essay. There's a great example of a concession in the commercials that I've provided you from the Super Bowl, the Apple commercial from 1984 is a great example of an extended concession and then the follow-up to the argument at the very end. It's actually a very powerful commercial, and it gives you some idea about how a concession works. Again, you want to include that other point of view up front at the beginning and not at the end, the way Tompkins says. Tompkins does have a lot of good ideas about persuasive writing, including using various genres like posters, like various media to create the argument. So don't think as though you have to write this as an argumentative essay necessarily. You can use different media, try it out, experiment with things, see what your colleagues can tell you in your workshop groups for this week, and get some feedback on how well you can persuade them and how well your persuasion is working. So the next thing that I want to focus on is memo writing. And in order to do that, let's take a look at this first. So I'm including this in the folder at the end of week 5 so that you can take a look at what memo writing is like. Again, this is going to be your program analysis, which you're going to complete and turn in at the very end of the course on May 18th. So basically, this is the format for writing any kind of a memo, and these are the basic areas that you can highlight in the memo as you're writing it. So this is the format at the top. You're going to include your name. You're going to include the Board of Education of your school district, what your subject is. You're looking at a writing program and recommending a writing program, and you're going to include the memo date. You're going to start off with a recommended action. So what's the problem? What do you see as the issue in your district? What's the recommendation that you would complete? And your third sentence should include how that recommended action answers that particular problem that you stated in your first sentence. From then on, you're going to essentially develop your argument. You're going to cover those issues in the body of the memorandum that have brought you to the place where you want to recommend this particular writing program. So really under issues, you want to look at the different writing programs, the other 2 writing programs that you've included in your consideration for the Board of Education, and you want to weigh them out. And of course, you want to include that your recommendation and your thoughts about your writing program late, so that you can make that point more powerfully to your more powerfully to your Board of Education and to your audience. So you're going to be asking, you're going to be answering questions such as, why is this important? What are your recommendations? Why should these recommendations be authorized? What's your rationale? What have you looked at? What research have you done? What evidence do you have? What's the effect of the action? How it will affect that problem that you've stated in your first sentence for the memorandum? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of pursuing this outcome, this particular writing program, as opposed to the other writing programs, and the advantages of disadvantages of each? So when you're talking about the disadvantages, you're including your thinking about what a concession could really be. How are you conceding to the other side that there are disadvantages to some of these writing programs, and there may be disadvantages to your particular writing program that you choose. In your options sections, you're going to give two alternative actions. Actually, I'm going to ask you for one. Okay, so what's the one program that you're going to point to? You might be able to talk a little bit about a backup, but memoranda really should be 2 pages in length at most. They can drift a little bit, but they've got to be pretty tight to those 2 pages. So you want to include in there why this particular option that you're selecting is the best one. Describe the options again in declarative sentences using action verbs. And finally, what are you asking for? The implementation. You're asking for money for a book club or some way from your Board of Education to be able to look at this particular writing program in detail with your teachers. As a literacy specialist, you're going to present it and provide it for your teachers, but obviously you need an inflow of some capital, some money to be able to engage your teachers in copies of the book, looks at the program, test considerations that you may want to look at. So you sort of want to ballpark how much that's going to cost, and release time, substitute time for the groups that you're going to be creating. Think back to our leadership course and think about PDPL as in terms of how you would develop something like that yourself. And you're in charge of the professional development. You're not going outside your district to find somebody else to lead the professional development for you. So that's an example. It's kind of what a template for a memorandum would look like. I've also set in some writing instructions for memoranda, and hopefully that can kind of help you think about these, the specifics of formatting, what kinds of things might be important as far as the grading is concerned. And again, you're using active verbs throughout. You're using subject predicate kinds of formations in your sentences. So here are some ideas as far as that's concerned. I've also used an example of a memorandum that might be helpful for you that I've included in that memorandum folder that you can take a look at. Finally, I want to just walk you through quickly to look at this particular PowerPoint, kind of the ABCs of administrative writing. You've thought about some of these things already because we've talked about accuracy and clarity, for example, and how important it is in a memorandum. You also want to be brief and direct. So you want to be accurate. You want to check your facts. Obviously, everything about your formatting should be correct. Best administrating is short and to the point. You're going to start off in sentence 1. Here's my recommendation. And you're going to build the argument for the recommendation by looking at different options and creating an implementation plan. So yeah, your Board of Education probably gets several different memos for each of its meetings. Yours really needs to stand out. Make sure that your writing is clear. Keep it simple. Use declarative sentences and stay away from fancy talk. Use declarative sentences, again, subject, verb, subject, predicate, all the way through. And kind of here's an example so that you're maintaining that brevity in your declarative sentences as you're creating your memo. Stay away from the stay away from the passive voice. You want to write in the active voice. So a good example of a passive voice is right here. If you're saying something is being done by someone, That's weak. That's passive voice. Someone did something is the active voice. Again, stick to that subject predicate balance in your sentences that you create for the memo, and make sure that you include your main point stated from the outset. Build your writing around that main point. Verify what you're going to say. Proofread what you want to provide. You can certainly even use this memo. My suggestion for this week is drop in some ideas about the memorandum and use it in a persuasive format. See what your colleagues think for this week in terms of the persuasion that you want to develop. Obviously, proofread. You may want to go to your workshop group to make sure everything is working well in the memorandum. Use active voice. Keep it short and simple. And make it clear and concise. Again, try multiple drafts. In this class, we're eschewing the single draft and the pre-write. We're really going to try to develop our writing, hone it, because revising really takes place in the writing. Make sure that your options are explained and prioritized, which one is the most important. Try to include a timetable in your memorandum as well as the cost. Okay. So hopefully that gives you some idea about that particular assignment. Again, it's going to happen a ways down the road, but I wanted to give it to you today just because it kind of coalesces around argument and will be the one argument that you are creating and are going to be graded for in this particular course. So I hope that's clear. If you have questions, please let me know. As you get closer, maybe email me about some particular programs you're thinking of developing through that memorandum and through your, directions to your Board of Education. I'd be glad to entertain those ideas and help you along the way. So I hope you have a great week. As I said, there's a lot of work to do this week. It likely keep you pretty busy. And please, by all means, enjoy yourselves, enjoy the writing, play around with it, experiment with some of these things and see what you can learn about writing. We're focused on purpose for this week, especially in our reflection. So be looking at what persuasion can do in terms of how it drives a purpose for your listeners and for your readers. That's it. I'm going to let you go. Thanks very much for listening in. And please, by all means,